All right, guys, welcome back to the show today. Thank y'all for liking, commenting, and subscribing. Today we have a very, very important guest today. We have my friend Melanie Salazar. Melanie is a digital reporter for MySA. Melanie is a brilliant journalist and a good friend of mine. Melanie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's very nice to have you on the show, Melanie. Melanie has been a huge support and a great friend for me in the journalism field. Every time Melanie sees a job opening or anything associated with journalism on LinkedIn, she will immediately send it to me because she knows that I am actively looking for work in the journalism field. In fact, I just picked up a freelancing position with My Culture, and my first story is going to be published tomorrow morning. So y'all go check that out. But I landed that gig as a freelancer due to Melanie and her sending me these job listings on LinkedIn. Melanie is a sweetheart. She is such a caring soul, and I'm very fortunate to have run across her, and I'm very blessed to say she's a good friend of mine. So I just want to thank you, Melanie, for that and helping me out along the way. So, Melanie, as a digital trending reporter for MySA, what does your day to day look like? I mean, how many stories are you writing a day? How many stories are you writing per week?
Yeah. Well, first off, also, like you did that all on your own in getting that job. So of course, like congratulations on that. And I know like your experience definitely pays off in like everything that you've done in getting you there. And also, yeah, so with my essay, my morning typically will start with checking like, of course, like 8 a.m. We typically have about like 25 to 30 minutes to do kind of like a quick search of like what our pitches are for that day. And so for me, that looks like going to Google Trends and searching up San Antonio and then searching up Texas. Sometimes I'll also search up different, like some of like the bigger cities like Dallas, Houston, and I'll see what people are searching up and like what's trending. So kind of like, okay, what are people talking about and like why? And in those topics, a lot of times it will be like something I am not like going to cover, like a sports game or something like that happened, like even sometimes like, outside of the country. But we can always check those things and see if there's any like my roommate just got here, so if you hear any noise. Um, but we'll see if there's any Texas ties to any topics that are trending. And then I will also do a pretty big search across like all sorts of social media channels. So I'll do TikTok, I will look on X, I'll even look on Facebook, which I'm still like, becoming like accustomed with and Reddit and will actually look there. So I'll search up, San Antonio or Texas across all of those platforms and I'll see if there's anything that's like sticking out to me in terms of like story ideas or things we want to follow up on or like celebrity spottings is something that can happen at any point in time. And so if that happens at any point, like in Texas, we'll definitely cover that. And so after that, we will go ahead and like pitch it to our editors. It's kind of like in a group, sort of like Slack channel type situation. And yeah, after that, it's kind of waiting to see if they're approved, which is typically like a wait time of like 10 minutes. Um, and then we'll just start with like the most timely or like urgent story, or something like a topic that we know performs well in the morning versus like afternoon. Um, and so that is typically how it starts. And then all in all, I'd say I'm writing about like average, I'd say most of the time it's three stories a day. Um, and I'm averaging anywhere from like 12 to 14 stories a week.
So Melanie specializes in writing stories about culture, music, and entertainment. Melanie, tell me, why do these areas interest you, and why do they matter to you as a journalist?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to like music, I mean, I'm just like a big music fan. I like a lot of different artists across all the genres. I've always, been very drawn to musicians who are I guess like anyone with a fan base, I think always piques my interest. And of course, a lot of things across a lot of different topics, like outside of music too, can draw in a really big audience. But I think because of my own personal interest in music and my own like fandom of certain artists, I've always been like, okay, like I care about this artist, but why do you? And like, why do all these big groups of people flock to this one spot anytime you're in town? Like, why do people even care that you like this barbecue spot or this restaurant? Like, there's always something deeper there to where it's like, they don't just randomly care about this barbecue. Like, I think it's always something where it's like, well, this singer or their music or their art like has really impacted me in this way. It helped me get through this. Like they talk about these topics and that really means something to me. And so I think that's typically what I'm looking at and what I'm interested in. And especially like how fandom kind of creates its own like friendships and connections with people like on all different kinds, in all different parts of the world and for all different reasons. And these people are so different. Like I just feel like there's so much to it, especially when there's just so many layers. Wow. Like especially when certain like music fandoms participate in like activism or like politics, or because they already have this big group of numbers, they're able to do all these different things. And so I think that also is really interesting to me. And at Texas State, actually, I took a class called Harry Styles and the Cult of Celebrity. And it kind of talked about those things where it's like, it was talking about fandom and how, there is power, of course, in numbers, and some of the things that the Harry Styles and One Direction fandoms, what they did over the years that the band was together, and also talking about just like the impact of music and musicians on the culture itself, like gender norms, societal standards, all sorts of things. So there's just so much I think that a shared hobby like music can have. And so I'm interested in all of those things. And then, of course, talking to the musicians who are enacting all of these things, whether they know it or not, or whether they mean to or not. I love to talk to musicians when I can and like ask them about why they're creating the work they're creating and like why it matters to them and like what do they think of how much impact they can have. Because I imagine that doesn't feel normal. I would be freaking out if I had that much impact on people. Um, and then, culture kind of ties in with all of those things. I think culture is just everything. Like in my head, I'm like, I don't know how maybe people don't like talking about culture, but you can't like not be a part of it or like associated with it. Um, and I think I just like things that make me like feel the deepest, whether it's happy, sad, angry. And I think people are drawn to those things too. Like an intense emotion is just something that I don't know. It's intense. Um, and so I feel like that typically arises in like a culture piece rather than a real estate piece. So I'm definitely drawn to anything culture or entertainment based. Yeah.
So I'm curious, with that being said about music, do you know how to play any instruments? And what is your favorite kind of music? Or your top three favorite artists or bands?
Ooh, I know very little how to play piano. I really want to get better at it, but I can play like one and a half songs maybe. Familiar with like all of the notes and kind of like the formation of like your hands that like works really well and stuff like that. I took piano lessons when I was a kid, so that's why.
Really, piano is a beautiful instrument. In
Yeah.
fact, if I could learn how to play one instrument, the piano probably would be my number one choice, honestly.
It really is. I wish I knew how to play guitar. My parents got me a guitar once for Christmas, and I feel really bad because I never learned how to play it. And I'm pretty sure it was like a Fender, like it was crazy. And I ended up selling it, which is it's just like all around regrets. But yeah, I wish I knew how to play guitar. But for now, just a little bit of piano. And then my favorite artist, kind of hard. Like I said, I like people across I like bands and musicians across like all the genres, but some of them is um, Taylor Swift, of course.
Oh yeah, Taylor Swift. I'm a big Swiftie.
Yes, Taylor Swift. Um, Definitely. I'm listening to a lot of Ariana Grande. I
Okay,
listen to like other bands as well. I'm trying to think of who else I want to like mention because
right. Give
quite
him
a
a shout
lot.
out.
Um, I like a lot of like R&B, pop, and folk music.
What do you notice about the San Antonio music scene? I mean, you've covered that pretty extensively in your work.
Yeah, yeah, I feel like so far it is like a crazy mix, honestly, because
Yeah,
I know
K-pop.
we'll get into this. Yeah, like I know we'll get into this in like the age range, but kind of like discussion. But like, yeah, San Antonio has a big kind of like K-pop fan base, which
Really?
I get, like I listen to a lot of the music as well. And so, I can understand it, which I think is unique to like writing these stories. Is I know where these people will be, like where the fans will be and like what they're searching up, which I think helps in this case. But there's also, a big like country fan, of course. And so I listen to country music as well. And my little sister is an even bigger country fan than I am. So like just in being related to her, I'm of course learning about all these people who are like up and coming as well as, the OGs that like everyone's gonna know just from being like raised in Texas because I'm from San Antonio. Um, and so I think like what I'm finding is like, especially when it comes to country, like these figures like Chris Stapleton, George Strait, like these people, like these audiences are never gonna get tired of hearing about them. Like they could
Thanks.
stop touring, they could stop singing, they could say that like they're not going back to it. And I feel like it's just so ingrained in like how we see San Antonio and how we see life in Texas. And like that nostalgia is just always there that the people are always going to be interested in what they're doing and what they like and where they live.
Hmm.
And so I think people are just really interested in the lifestyle behind the artist aside from their music, which I think is really cool because it kind of ties
Well,
the whole.
yeah. Well, speaking of George Strait, I mean, Melanie just wrote two pieces for my essay about George Strait. Melanie, talk to me about that experience covering one of country's biggest stars. Those actually I sent those articles that Melanie wrote to my grandparents because they are huge George Strait fans and they just loved it.
I love that. I love that they loved it. I feel like my aunt too was like, "Where was he? Like, what is going on?" Like, I need to see it now. But yeah, that one was one where it was kind of in that morning, like, search of like looking up Texas. I have two separate TikTok accounts, and so one I like specifically use for finding stories. Um, and so because the algorithm on TikTok is so good or scary, I don't know. It's kind of tailored to like what I'm searching up, which really, really helps because I can be scrolling my For You page, and I'm going to see Texas related like content, like no matter what. And so it was kind of one of those searches where I was like, okay, like what are people talking about? Like what's going on? And at that point, this random woman had like posted her selfie with George Strait, and she was just like, "Oh my gosh, like I just ran into him at a Dairy Queen, and like this is crazy." And I think she like hashtagged Catula, which is like the town that it happened in. And so, for things like that, like I don't know what Catula is. Like when I saw it, I was like, "What?" And so I'm just kind of searching up those things and being like, "Okay, like this is a town, like this is kind of vaguely where it is." And through searching up like even Catula and George Strait, then that's kind of where the extra research comes in, where it's like, okay, like this isn't too random. Like he actually has property near here. He has multiple properties in Texas, but one of them I think is a ranch that's like within like the 30-minute range of Catula. And so it's kind of like, oh, okay, like this is all, these things are kind of connecting. And so after that, it was just like reaching out to that person over TikTok, and that can be hit or miss because everyone has jobs. And so with a timely story like this, we just kind of like hope and comment and follow up, like all in the same day, and reach out to them to see if they will give us permission to use the photo. If they will send it to us over email so we can actually have it without like that weird text and cropping.
Hmm.
And then we typically ask them like, what can you tell us? Like, did y'all talk about anything? Like, how were you feeling? Like, how did you even discover it was him? Like, did he just kind of rule through? Did someone come get you? What did he order? That's always something. Like, I think San Antonio's
Hmm.
big foodies, so we want to know what they're
Hmm.
eating. Like, what are they coming from for? And so, yeah, that one was a fun one to write. It was just like the spotting also isn't like enough. Like there has to be some, I mean, it is enough, but like it does need some sort of context. Like, okay, like now that you're telling me about George Strait, like also by the way, what is he up to? Like, what is he doing? Why is he out and about? And so of
Right?
course in that research, it was like, oh, he's about to go on a stadium tour. And through doing that, it's like a 5 night, I think, tour. It might have already happened, honestly, by the time that like we're doing this. And that was like an own story in itself that I didn't write. It was before I got to MySA, but kind of similar to what you and I were talking about before this started. It's like he did this stadium tour, but he didn't come to San Antonio. I don't even think any Texas states are included in his tour, so that was like a thing in itself, where we covered that. But yeah, and then the second one was just like I think it was like a follow up because this business is serving these like George Strait tacos. Um, and they do that because he came to visit once and like recently ish. And he like signed their guitar and they had this really nice story. And they had posted that like photo around the time that the Dairy Queen thing happened. And so my editor was like, oh, we got another one. Like, can we reach out to them? So it was kind of like the same process where I called and like texted and asked like the similar like round of questions.
So Melanie has a very impressive resume, obviously, guys. I mean, she works for MySA right now, but Melanie has worked for several different publications during her undergrad and postgrad. And Melanie, I'm just curious as to how MySA is different from the publications you have worked with. And Melanie told me that when she first started off, she was a little intimidated with MySA. So, Melanie, why were you intimidated and how did you overcome that in your early days working for MySA?
Yeah. So I feel like what's different, I'm gonna like kind of like compare it to like the freelance work that I did before because I feel like that's most like I guess like applicable. Because my college experience, I think just like it's a bit it's like a college outlet, so it's definitely professional and like means a lot and like teaches you a lot, but it definitely carries, I think, a different pressure than like graduating and then being like, like now these people know that I I got a degree, like I'm no longer, like a working student. I'm someone who's like graduated, gotten the degree, and I'm asking for like the contract position. So yeah, the two outlets that I had worked for before, um it was one of them actually, San Antonio Magazine is like under the same company as Hearst, which is what San Antonio Express and MySA is under. It was San Antonio Magazine, and that one was like such a good experience. I really like appreciate that outlet too and that editor because I mean, it was kind of in a similar position to you before, where I was really trying to get experience after college and being like, I really just want to see what I can do and I want to learn as much as I can. Like, someone please let me. And so I really appreciate them for like letting me do that. What I think is different is that I was operating on such a different like deadline. So when I was writing for San Antonio Magazine, I wrote for them over the summer. So like pretty much all of June and July. And then I continued doing unrelated writing, like unrelated work for them. Like I wasn't writing articles, I was doing something different. But I had like a week to work on each story I did for them for San Antonio Magazine. So like I know that I had something assigned to me on a Monday because it was like a series where I was interviewing different DJs that were coming to Texas. And so every week I knew I was interviewing someone different, but I knew I had a week to do research and to come up with these questions and set up the calls, the emails. Sorry, I'm like choking. Um,
No,
and
you're good. That happened to me on my last show.
yeah, I'm like choking. I'm like talking too fast. But like, with my essay, that timing is completely different. And so I think it's just like that is one of the big things. And I think like also like working with a team and having to search for I wouldn't say a majority of my stories, but a lot. I'm trying to think of like the percentage with my essay that like I'm finding stories versus being pitched. But I feel like it's a
Yeah,
lot.
I was wondering about that,
It's
what
like
like
a
the
lot.
ratio was.
Yeah, and so I think that's like another major thing that's different. And then also a lot of planning ahead. I think it's something that I didn't understand, which is maybe naive of me, but like there's so much planning ahead of time, like weeks out and like months out at MySA and like I think in just general journalism jobs. Whereas of course at San Antonio Magazine, like my mind was focused only on the series that I had at the moment. But at MySA, I'm thinking about, oh, okay, like when Fiesta was coming up in San Antonio, like a month before Fiesta even started, we were planning out Fiesta stories. And so it's kind of like you're thinking about the story at hand, but you like have to pivot so quickly. Like your brain, like you really have to like switch topics and be able to be like, okay, like I'm not thinking about that story anymore. Now I'm on something completely different. Um, so yeah, it's so different and like unlike anything I've ever done and unlike any work I ever had to do.
Yeah, your portfolio is very diverse. I mean, every time I go on LinkedIn, Melanie, I just see a notification that she has released another story, and it's something that's just like completely different than the previous story. And it's really interesting. And honestly, I respect it because like it's hard. I can only imagine like having to write about one topic and put a lot of energy, and then meanwhile you have all these other stories going on. I'm just fascinated by the life of a journalist, and that's why I wanted to have you on here because I just want those who don't know what the life of a journalist looks like, to be enlightened as to what it really looks like. I mean, because it's a very interesting profession in my opinion. So, but so like going back to that George Strait story, that was something that was urgent that had to get out quick, right? So how do you balance like those urgent stories that need to get out in a timely manner based on the ones like you just mentioned that are planned ahead in advance? So I can only imagine how, for example, if there's a huge crash on I-35 or something that needs to get out very quickly, it can be just so challenging to go from writing what you're writing about now to pivoting towards that. So how do you balance it?
Yeah, I think that was part of like also like what I thought was so intimidating about coming to
Yeah,
this new role. I knew that it would introduce me to like a range of things and breaking news was not something I had much experience with outside of like my studies. Um, and like in my most recent role before I came to MySA, I was a trending news reporter, but that meant that I was like a social media reporter actually was my exact, title.
yeah,
And
I love
so
that.
although I was writing about things that were trending, they weren't necessarily like they needed to be up that day within my kind of like 8 hour or like 5 to 6 hour like shift. But they didn't need to be up within like an hour or like 45 minutes, which at MySA sometimes we do have things like that. Um, on Mondays and Tuesdays, I work a 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. shift. And so those are typically the days, like Mondays and Tuesdays is typically when I'm really getting breaking news because 7 a.m. is when you want to know how late you're going to
Right.
work and how you need to dress for work and whether you like all hope is lost and there's like a car crash on I-35 because you're not getting out of that. And so a lot of times like that's the stories that I'm working on. And so it's really like I'm still learning how to do it. And like honestly, like a part of my best answer that I can give right now is like with a lot of guidance from my main editor at MySA. Her name is Candace. She's amazing. And it's kind of like working together to find the information that's like available now. And so it's like reaching out to authorities, so reaching out to police and reaching out to like EMS if it's a crash, and figuring out what they can tell us. And like, there's also like these websites that I never knew existed. I'm sorry, I'm like focusing on traffic because that's one of the main breaking news that we do in the morning. But there's these two sites that actually report like, oh, is that okay? I was
No,
like,
you're good. You're
okay, there's these two sites that report like live crashes that are happening at that moment. And so I didn't even know that existed. It's called Sig Alert and TransGuide. And so if you search it up for a certain area, it'll give you this information about like where the crash is and, like what lanes are closed and even what the delay time is. And so a lot of times, like even if we don't have the additional information from like authorities, we can still let the reader know what we know, which is that this is how you're impacted. This is where you can't access. This is the alternate route that they're suggesting. And it's really about like getting the information from the websites and then getting the information from the Texas Department of Transportation's like social media pages and then going to like police and going to EMS and like putting it all into one like package because all of those things kind of like solve the puzzle of like how is this impacting me, the reader. And so sometimes there's like a limited amount of puzzle pieces we can include there. But it's almost like anything we can tell the reader about something like that's already going to impact them, like is what our job is, like literally telling them what we know and the best we can, like getting it out as quick as possible. And so a lot of it is also just like if I had, I'm kind of a yapper if you haven't noticed, but if
no,
I
you're good. This is great. I'm glad you're elaborating because
it's
like
like
journalism is not just writing, you guys. I mean,
yeah,
you're seeing it right here live. I mean, there's so many moving parts. I mean, it's crazy,
yeah.
honestly.
But like it's kind of like having like when I'm writing, it's like the yapping needs to be most of the time to a minimum where it's like if I had like a 2-minute phone call and I was on the phone with my mom and she was like, "Hey, how bad is the traffic?" It's like, "Here's how you're impacted. Here's where it is. Here's where you need to go, and here's who told me." And so that's like kind of like how I get those stories out on a very quick deadline, along with like the help of my editor.
Yeah, that's super impressive.
And it's hard. I'll say that too. It's not like easy by all means. I'm still learning, but that is how I've worked through it so far.
Okay, so I thought this was funny. So I told my grandpa today that I was interviewing you and that you were a digital trending reporter. And he looked at me, he goes, "Well, what is that? What is a digital trending reporter?" And that's a good. So how would you describe that? I mean, it's kind of like a fancy way to say you're a journalist slash reporter, but
It
what
is.
is a digital trending reporter?
Honestly, like I feel like it's when I'm gonna say like what I best know from what I've been told. But like whenever I was getting hired, like it was sometime kind of interchangeably used as a trending news reporter. I think the digital aspect is mainly just meant to say like it's for the website.
Right.
Because of course there's like broadcast and there's like anchor and like, that's like live and you're seeing their
And
face.
my essay is strictly digital, correct?
Yeah, we don't have like
Yeah.
I mean, you see our faces sometimes, like on Instagram and TikTok, but we aren't like live streaming us being somewhere typically, or at least since I've been there, that's not happening. And so I think the digital aspect is that the trending is, I think that I'm focusing on like trending news, which honestly, no, definitely like not on. A lot of news is trending stuff. Um, but I think trending news is kind of like it's very immediate in that it means like what's trending literally now and
Hmm.
like literally what's trending on social media and online. And then yeah, the reporter part is kind of typical. I don't exactly know why they're all grouped together, I'm gonna be honest, but it's really I think I'd explain it as like covering trending news and what people are talking about online and across social media platforms.
I actually interviewed for Melanie's position with my essay as well, the digital trending reporter, a few weeks ago. Unfortunately, I did not land the job. They told me that I need to grow my writing portfolio, which, with Melanie's help, I am now doing with my culture. So once I get some more bylines out there, definitely going to be contacting those affiliated with MySA, Community Impact, and all the large media outlets in San Antonio. But it was still a great opportunity to interview for MySA, Mr. Peter Scampardo, I believe his name is. And he said, I mentioned that I was friends with Melanie, and his eyes lit up, and he said, "What a great job Melanie is doing so far." So, shout
Oh.
out, Mr. Scampardo.
Yes, shout out. He's a very, very good editor. Um, I do love like it's always hard to be edited, I think, but like I love it in that like I am being told what I need to like fix, I guess. Like because I know I'm not like a perfect writer by all means, so I like I don't know. I kind of like love it. I kind of love it. As long as, if someone was telling me, that like my piece was like completely bad, obviously that'd be hard. But like from your editors, I think it's like it's so much more helpful to be like open to that like criticism and like what makes your story better because then it makes your story better.
So, what was that like aha moment for you, Melanie? You mentioned you grew up in San Antonio. What was that moment in your childhood or later in life where you really realized that I'm gonna be a journalist for a living? I mean, what was that moment like? Do you have any memories of like your childhood or anything like that?
Um, kind of. So like as a kid, I really liked to read um like just general like fiction books and um it was typically like I wasn't like into like fantasy books. And like by I liked reading, I mean like literally from like I want to say like since I was like I don't know, like 5 or 6. And
What kind of books did you like to read? What series?
um I liked to read I didn't read like series. They were typically like standalone books, but I literally have like a whole thing right here. I'd say I liked a little bit of mystery. I liked
Mm.
kind of things that like involved like ghosts. I guess this maybe that is fantasy. In my head it's not fantasy. I don't like things like
Sci-fi per se?
yeah, maybe. It's like I couldn't really get into stuff with like dragons and like magic and stuff like
So no Harry Potter. We can cross that out.
no, I just watched Harry Potter for like the first time like last year.
No way.
That was my
You
like
never read the Harry Potter books?
no, I didn't.
Hey,
I
great literature.
fake literature, yeah. I was reading a lot of like yeah, I was reading things with like ghosts, things with like a lot of rom-coms oddly from that age. I really
Ooh,
like
rom-coms are slept on.
yeah, like
Yeah.
the Diary of a Wimpy Kid, like the Dork Diaries, actually like Smile, the Smile books that were really big. I was really into those. That was like maybe the only series that like I
You
actually
know, it's interesting you mentioned that. Sorry to cut you off, but like when I think of rom-com, I always think of like rom-com movies. Like what are some
yeah.
good rom-com books? My grandpa is a huge rom-com fan. And honestly, he's kind of like made me appreciate them. Yeah, he'll watch like these like Asian soap operas, like and
Wait,
like
they're
and
so
like
good.
and like these like European rom-coms that are like so romantic, and like I just started watching them with him one time and I was like, hey, this is not too bad. So I can only imagine in literature format those would be pretty good. What are some good
Yeah.
ones?
Yeah, yeah, they're so good. Like right now I'm reading Wild Eyes, which is like I said,
Wild Eyes.
I don't typically read series, but this one is actually like it's part of it has a book before it called Wild Love. And then I really like Emily Henry as well. And I used to like Colleen Hoover. Verity, I think was my favorite from her. That one's kind of like suspenseful, kind of like a thriller. I guess like when I say like ghosts, I'm kind of like if someone goes like missing, one of the best books, I'm seeing it right now, is actually called Notes on Your Disappearance. And it was like a mix
Ooh,
of like obviously, you know, um, like a thriller, but like it had like a love story is like a big part of it. Um, and yeah, it's just like I've always liked reading and like I always felt really like impacted by these characters. Like, and I felt like there was always stuff to learn. Like I was not bored reading books. And so I think another like dream of mine that I'd like to do is like, write a book someday.
yeah, I was gonna
Uh,
ask.
yeah, I think like as a kid, I was just like, I was knowing that I liked stories and I knew that I wanted to like tell stories of my own. And I think when I was kind of thinking about how I would do that, I was like, wait, well, like, real people actually exist. And they do have, these stories, and they experience some of these things, and they go through these difficulties, and they experience, love or passion with like, not just people, but like things that we do and things that we create and jobs that we have and music that we make, like literally just people. And so I think because I've been interested in like people's stories, even though in books technically they're not real, but they're real to me. Um, I was looking for a job that would allow me to tell people's stories. Um, and thankfully I get to do that at MySA. Even if it's like I'm talking about like a trending video. Like today I wrote about like how these students in college stations are experiencing this like flash flooding, and so it's like flooded like a lot of their like parking lots and like the campus, like Texas A&M's campus. And I got to talk
Mhm.
to just like a student about like what it was like at her apartment complex and like what it looked like and how she was scared, and like even just that, it's like that is someone's story, that's a memory in someone's life. And I think even just
Yeah.
doing that is something that like I enjoy. So definitely stemmed from loving reading, wanting to do it by my on my own, and being like, how can I start telling stories like literally now? And like what would I like the most? And that was journalism.
So rom-coms and ghosts. Honestly, I'm glad you mentioned that though, because I never think about rom-com books, honestly.
Mhm.
And you know, I can appreciate a good romance every now and then. So yeah, maybe I'll give some rom-com books a try. You said Wild Eyes and Wild Lover?
Honestly, if you're gonna start, I think your first one should be Funny Story by Emily Henry. It's exactly kind of what we're talking about, where it's a romance, but it's funny. And so it's literally a rom-com in a book, and she's such a good writer. So I feel like maybe start off with that one.
Okay. Do you feel as if, since you do like rom-coms, does that translate to your writing? Do you tend to write with kind of like a romantic tone? I mean, obviously with my essay you can't. You have to kind of adhere to their tone. But like when you're just writing personally, do you kind of like have a romantic tone in your writing?
I'd say if I'm doing a feature, yes. You can kind of see like if not romantic, almost like I think they're more poetic. Um,
Sure.
because
There
of
you
course
go.
I can't be romantically into my sources. I'm just kidding. No, but I did like a feature over Madison Skinner, which is a Texas volleyball player. She plays for a professional league in Austin. And that was one of, I want to say two, hopefully I'm not getting that wrong, but like kind of like profile type stories I did for my essay. The other one was the one about the coyote, Spurs coyote. But with Madison, like I got to kind of talk about a little bit on her upbringing and like how she sees the sport of volleyball. And that was something where like, although a lot of our tone with my essay is conversational, you'll see times where I'm being a bit more serious or I'm being a bit like intense
Hmm.
with my word choice. Or like I'm kind of like inserting these dramatic pauses or like short sentences, and that's to like kind of create that like effect. And I think reading has definitely helped me with that because like I've subconsciously like learned how to be intense, I guess, because with these romances, there's
Yeah.
typically some sort of breakup scene or like some really hard moment, and like it's kind of already in my head. Like I know how they would describe it. Short sentences, I think, is a really not like easy way, but it's kind of a very quick way to establish that sort of intensity, like really short sentences.
Yeah. Well, that was honestly some like the biggest thing that I learned in my undergrad at Texas State, primarily due to Professor Kranz's instruction. But I did not know how to write in a news tone at all. I mean, my vocabulary was all over the place, and I did not know how to write for like a news piece at all. And in the beginning, sometimes I felt like when I had to adhere to the news formalities and the news tone, I felt as if like it was almost like hindering my writing in a way, and I kind of had to like conform my writing to what news publications sound like, and that was difficult for me because like I would want to kind of have my own style, my own tone, but you simply cannot do that. particularly when you're writing like for a news publication. So that was a big learning curve for me, and also like learning how to like format a actual news piece was like very enlightening for me because I did not know how to do that at all.
Yeah, yeah, I feel like in like English classes we'd learn. So I started off shortly as an English major because like I said, I went from reading to writing to being like, how do I write? And then once I switched my major from English to journalism, I continued with a creative writing minor so that I could still keep like figuring
Mhm.
out like how to like and I really think that helped. But like I feel like with essays, we're always trying to use those like bigger words to sound like
Yeah,
smarter. And like
yeah,
in writing, I think I thought we had to do that too. And then like over time, they're like, no, like someone needs to understand this. Like you need to like be able to explain this in a way that's digestible to the common like person with a common like education, with a regular job, who's low on time, whose attention you're not going to have for that long. Like, and so I think that was like a learning curve for me too, of like kind of trying to figure out like what sort of like word choice to use and like the whole inverted pyramid thing and the nut graph. Like it's a lot.
yeah.
It does make sense as you, I think like just like I don't know, like once they explain it, like the whole inverted pyramid thing, it's like, yeah, not everyone's gonna read to the end of an article. I think most people reading to an end of an article is maybe a journalist. Hopefully it's everyone, but like a lot of times I think it is a journalist who's reading all the way from start to finish. But yeah, I think I do like how my job offers like a mix of, with breaking news, you're not necessarily going to see my like like my kind of more lighthearted tone if someone of course passed away or if it's an emergency or if it's something like that, like you're not going to see those things, and that's because it's not needed there, it's not appropriate. But in other stories like my Madison Skinner one or the coyote or even like um sometimes like whenever we do rankings of like the different towns and how they scored, you'll see my voice there, with like little sentences or little remarks that I make. Sometimes I'm a bit like sassy. And so you'll see that and they welcome that at MySA, which I think is like a really lucky thing and like a really good thing to look for. Just like if you're a regular journalist looking for a job, like if that's a big thing that like matters to you, I'd look for it because it is out there.
Interesting. Yeah, maybe I'll have to add some sass to my articles. No, but yeah, like it's really interesting because like now that I'm thinking about it, sometimes I would almost take it personal when professors or editors would make remarks on my writing and they'd want to edit it to follow kind of the guideline and the standard more. And I would think it was like a really good breakthrough for me, like what I had written, and I was like very proud of it. But I learned the power of being succinct in your writing, being succinct, but also providing the appropriate detail when needed. So it's a very fine line you kind of have to follow with elaborating and having your personality come out, but also maintaining that business news tone.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah. And like feature news definitely lets that come out, like if you're a feature writer, but I'm sure it's really hard to like write such long stories like so often. So, yeah, definitely hard.
We're totally like nerding out on journalism right now, guys. But I completely forgot to mention that Melanie is pursuing her graduate degree at NYU, which is very impressive while working a full time position with MySA. So, Melanie, talk to me about that. I completely forgot to mention that. I should have mentioned that much earlier, but I'm sorry. But yeah, tell me about your experience with NYU. And in that same breath, Melanie, did you ever consider Columbia as well? Because Columbia is a very prominent, uh, program for journalists.
Mm-hmm. So I did, but I think like whenever I checked out Columbia, I don't know that I was able to easily figure out one if they had an online program that would allow me to not have to like move across the country. Um,
Mm,
and also, um, like yeah, a lot of my work, you know, I want to do in kind of New York City and stuff like that. And so I was kind of like, oh, like this sounds like, you know, kind of the place I want to be. And I think a lot of the professors in this program, like seeing that it was online, seeing that like a big way that they advertise this program is that it is meant to be flexible for people working full time. And like a lot of like the website was saying like we are going to help you, like we are committed to like helping you make this work, we are flexible, like we are designed for full-time workers. And I think that really made me be like, okay, like I can do
Yeah,
this. I was
it's
intimidated.
good marketing.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, like if this is a big kind of like point of the program so that it could be accessible to anyone, like working parents, like
Yeah.
just people that are working, you know, multiple jobs, then like this makes me feel like I can do it. And
And
then
not to mention, sorry to cut you off, but the places you want to work, like Associated Press, Vogue, a lot
yeah,
of people who have worked there have gone to NYU and received their master's degree.
yeah, that's what also made me be like, okay, like, because that's honestly how it started, where I was looking up people and I don't know why I was doing this. I don't know if I was self-sabotaging myself because I was feeling sad or what, but like I was looking at all these people and like figuring out like, how did you do this? And yeah, a lot of them had gotten master's, done the master's program, like the one that I'm doing, or a different, like journalism related one in person at NYU. And so I was kind of like, okay, like I think this would help me. And if I can make it work financially, then I don't see like this as the next wrong step. This seems like it could be the next right step. Um, and so it's been hard to do both, but it has been like really helpful in a lot of ways because of course like the skills I'm learning there are making it a lot like easier for me to do the hard work that my full-time job like requires of me, especially when it comes to doing those feature news pieces or like longer stories or not being so lengthy in my sentences and like cutting down on those run-on sentences and figuring out which details are most important. That is
Mhm.
a lot of what my professors at NYU are helping me learn and helping me do through their own examples. And so I feel like it's kind of like it almost feels like tutoring where it's like, okay, you just got this full-time job and you're being required to do some big things and some hard things and some new things. And it's kind of like I would come, you know, I would be done with work and end my work day and then get to kind of get this like tutoring as to how to make it better and like tips and tricks. And I'd get to ask questions and be like, hey, I'm like really struggling with this. Like, can you help me? And I'd
Mhm.
really get some sort of advice. So
So Melanie received the San Antonio Association of Hispanic Journalists Scholarship for NYU, correct?
Um, yeah, it's like, I mean, it can go for like, yeah, any university, but that is one of my scholarships. And then I have a separate scholarship through NYU as well.
So Melanie, talk about that. Talk about being a Hispanic journalist and what does that mean to you?
I think like it's a lot of, you know, of course, I would want people who I like a lot of like news, and I think just like in general, when it comes to media, there's just historically been a lack of representation that people are familiar with. And I think I'd always want to be someone where it's like, oh, I can kind of see myself in you. I can see my lifestyle or what matters to me or what I'm worried about reflected in this person. Like they might understand what that's like. And I think just in general, in any position and in any job, it does help to have representation of all kinds. And so I think, especially with this, like in my head, journalism is kind of a more, not more creative, but in my head, it's a bit more of a creative, like job choice to
Very
choose
much
compared,
so.
yeah,
Yes.
compared to like something like maybe like teaching. I mean, teaching is actually very creative. My roommate is a teacher, and it's crazy how much she has to come up with. But like, I guess like
Like maybe a
accounting, banking,
yeah, an accountant or something.
medical,
Yes.
And I think,
Yeah, I agree with you. I pride myself on that, honestly.
yeah, and it's
I
like
think journalists are the coolest people, honestly.
they are, and it's like I think it's kind of hard. It can be hard to be like I think of like myself, like a little kid and like growing up with like in a Hispanic household and stuff like that. Like it can sometimes be hard to, I think, especially if you grow up, I think like with any like sort of like concerns about money and like what your
Hmm.
looks like and what you've seen people who look like you, like what it seems like they achieve based on what media is showing you. Like it can sometimes be hard, I think, to imagine yourself in these creative positions. It's like, is that possible for me? Like I know it's
Yeah.
possible for some people, but can I do it?
But that's another thing about journalism is obviously your top journalists make very good money. But generally speaking, journalism is not the most lucrative of fields. But it's not the money that, yes, the money drives us, of course, but it's the creativity, it's the fulfillment that we get as writers that is what makes the job amazing. The money comes, of course, but that's one thing that, I mean, people, even when I interview for jobs, some people will ask me, Luke, so why did you choose journalism? You given how hard it is, and I was like, well, that's a good question, sir, and I totally agree with you that it is hard. However, I think journalism chose me in a way. At a very young age, I was able to showcase my writing talents, and that was just something that I naturally was very good at. But that's that just goes to show how journalists, like, it's not about the money. It's really about the the creativity, like you said, honestly.
Yeah, yeah, creativity and yeah, like a lot of power. Like that's not like why I got into it, but I think it's like a crazy thing where it's like, shoot, like I have the power
Well,
to
yeah,
voice,
yeah,
like give voice
totally.
to people, and like that.
Because yeah, totally. Because like even with that George Strait piece, I mean, when you reached out to that lady at Dairy Queen, she was probably like, "Oh my God, like the media is reaching out to me," you know, and it's like, yeah, you do, Loki, have a little bit of power, because you're with the media, yeah, 100%, and you get a little sense of confidence when you're out there interviewing people, talking to sources, because you are the media, and they can benefit from talking to you, so they'll roll out the red carpet for you 9 times out of 10, you know.
Yeah, I really want to like I always try, and like sometimes this doesn't always happen. But it's like I remember also like watching the news a lot as a kid and being like everything's so negative and like in
Yeah.
the beginning I really wanted, and I still want this, but I think I'm noticing the power in telling those like harder and sadder stories as well. But like a big thing that
Hmm.
I always want to try to do to the best of my ability is like bring some sort of like hope or some sort of like even just like silliness or like oddness or like
Yeah, 100%.
joy. So if I can do that, I think that's when I feel like my power is being used the best. If I'm making someone feel better about their life or just themselves, because obviously they deserve it. So
Okay, so how much longer, Melanie, do you have in your graduate program?
I probably wouldn't don't graduate till like the summer of 2026, so literally like a year from now.
Okay, sweet. So let me hit you with some quick hitters, Melanie. I don't want to keep you for too much longer. Melanie, what would you say is like the audience for my essay? What is the audience like, and the demographic?
So like actually statistically, I think what I've been told by my editors is around, and hopefully, you know what, I'm gonna just speak for myself because I don't want to get it wrong and then say they told me. But what I would think is early 20s to early or like mid 40s is like age.
Okay.
Um like I think, of course, the kind of like actual like other like demographics when it comes to like race or ethnicity would literally just be like San Antonio's. And so kind of like reflecting diverse perspectives and like really trying to pay attention to that in our sourcing and like who we're interviewing is making sure it's diverse. So literally, all people. And I think like also like that is a big part of why we're so conversational is that we want people like regardless of whatever their highest education is to be able to understand and benefit from this news because that's the way news should be. It should be something that all people can like digest and um be impacted by because they're being impacted by like the things we're discussing. And so it's of course going to have I think a different tone than like the New York Times does or something like that because
Hmm.
really trying to gauge the way we speak and shift it to um, kind of like someone who did go to college and didn't, like literally people kind of like who are coming from all these different walks of life.
Speaking of the New York Times, Melanie, are you familiar with a Maureen Dowd?
Mm-mm.
Maureen Dowd? Well, she is one of the editors of the New York Times. And I was talking with my grandpa before this, and he said, ask her if she knows who Maureen Dowd is. She's a highly respected columnist and editor for the New York Times. She's known for her political columns where she attacks virtually every politician known to man. She doesn't let anyone slide. But yeah, Maureen Dowd, and she's an exceptional woman. She has a very extensive career, and to be an editor for the New York Times as a woman is a very remarkable. I guess this is my grandpa's words. I guess there's not very many women editors of the New York Times, but Maureen Dowd, Melanie, if that's someplace where, and I'll text you her name, but
Yeah.
if you're interested in working for the New York Times, definitely look her up. My grandpa was raving about her political columns. She has some really good ones where she goes at, everyone. So
I love that. I love a confident journalist. I think that's what I'm like trying to also strive to be like confident in my words and my writing because I think it's really hard to do that. But I feel like you can really notice it. Like when a journalist is confident in what they are saying, like it's literally it reads so clearly. Like you can
mhm,
tell. So that sounds like what this writer is like. So yeah, I'm excited to like read her work.
yeah. And
Things.
then Melanie's also interested in uh, Vogue too, right? Are you into fashion? Obviously.
Honestly, like I'm more into Vogue because of their like they actually do have like a culture section. And sometimes they also interview like younger entrepreneurs.
Oh,
Emma
interesting.
Chamberlain is someone I really like. She's a podcaster and influencer and she has her own coffee company. And I actually saw someone do an interview with her kind of like about like her journey from being a YouTuber to being like kind of more of like an influencer to being like owning Chamberlain Coffee. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I think I really just as someone who like takes in a lot of different media, I love that whole landscape, like digital media, fandom, things like that, people who have fans. Obviously, Emma Chamberlain has a lot of fans. And she's like changed the YouTube industry in a lot of ways. And so that's kind of where like Vogue, Teen Vogue, like kind of anything Condé Nast, like even like The Cut and stuff like that, like my interest in those places comes in because they dive into these different like um kind of like social media sort of personas and they like see the impact that these people have. Um and so
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of where those like interests come in.
I feel like when I look at Melanie's portfolio, I'm just quickly updated about modern pop culture because I'm so out of the loop on so many things. But when I open her portfolio, I mean, you got all the stories there, so many pop culture stories. So it's fun to read about them for sure. Melanie, I won't keep you for much longer, but how would you, if you had to describe yourself as a writer in three or a couple of words, how would you describe yourself?
Such a hard question. It's like such a hard question. Okay, let me think. Let me think.
Confident. We could say confident.
That
We're working on it.
I'm
Oh,
dead
sassy,
serious.
sassy. You said sassy.
Sassy. Yeah, I think sassy.
A sassy journalist. Now break that down. What is that? What does a sassy journalist look and sound like? That's interesting. A sassy
Um,
journalist.
I think it's like sometimes being sarcastic, or sometimes it's like words like, oh, it's like if you say something and saying like, well, this isn't exactly a surprise in Texas. Like it's probably not,
Hmm.
or saying like this
Yeah,
isn't the weirdest
that's definitely
thing.
the MySA tone for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Or even if it's like, oh, like in this economy, every dollar counts, or something like that, like where it's kind of like literally like how you'd, I guess, like talk to like someone.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. And not
Okay, we got sassy. Hey, what would the next two words be?
um
I think you're very organized. You're a very organized writer. Your vocabulary is advanced. I would say professional, organized. Yeah, I just read your Canyon Lake story today. Is that still the case with the migration trends in spite of the current um, drought that they're experiencing?
there has been kind of Canyon Lake has been kind of popping off in terms of like housing.
Yeah,
People are really wanting to like move there and actually moving there. Um,
yeah, Canyon Lake is dope.
yeah, I think Canyon Lake is like it's probably because it's like almost like an Austin suburb. I think people want to be near Austin, but they don't want to deal with like the traffic and the complete city life. But kind of like building off that, I think like in a lot of my stories, like I want to say detailed, but like obviously every journalist is detailed, but I'd say like I can be a bit over detailed sometimes. That's what I'm saying, where it's like I do need to work on being concise. So I'm trying to think of a word that's like over detailed. Because sometimes it's a good thing and sometimes it's a bad thing. But I think that's definitely a quality that is like integral to me as a journalist. I often have more details sometimes than I need. But I think that can be a pro and a con. It just needs to like, there's a good balance between it.
Is this your first interview, Melanie? Have you been interviewed before?
Have I been interviewed like about journalism? Um,
Like, yeah, in like a format like this?
Not like this, no.
Let's go.
Yeah. Like the other ones have been like panels. Like I said, the reason I couldn't do this one last time is because it was like a panel, but it wasn't like a one-on-one thing where I had to talk about myself for so long. I don't think I actually have done that like ever. It's kind of a lot.
Well, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on was because you deserve more of a spotlight. You deserve recognition. I mean, you work hard and your stories are great, and you're a great journalist and someone who I honestly look up to and admire. Like I said, guys, I mean, I was going through a rough time where post grad I did not have much going in terms of the opportunities in the journalism world. And I noticed Melanie on LinkedIn and I reached out to her and connected with her and just kind of picked her brain about her experience with journalism and her current position. That was when she was with Lone Star. And she just would send me these job postings, and I applied for just about every single one. And in fact, she helped me land several interviews with Community Impact and MySA, and now with Culture Map. And it's just wild because I've never met Melanie, and it's literally our first time speaking, but we've already developed a relationship as a professional relationship on LinkedIn, and it's just a beautiful thing, honestly. And I really appreciate you, Melanie, because no one has ever like done this for me. Like, I mean, I have only been graduated for 6 months, but still, I mean, no one has done this. Like, and so like I really appreciate you, and you're a really unique person. And I noticed that in your Instagram bio, it says leave people better than when you found them. And I think you definitely live by that because you certainly have made me a better person just based off of all the job postings that you send me. So thank you, Melanie. And
Yeah.
it's been great having you on the show.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. You need to let me know when you have a name for it too. That needs to be our next brainstorming session.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
this is great. You asked great questions.
Thank you, Melanie, so much. Well, guys, that's it for today. I'll be back with another show for y'all very soon. But until next time, thank you guys. Bye.
Bye.